A tall tale. Betting eternity on a bluff. The only thing wrong with immortality is that it tends to go on forever. Herb Khan. Curtains up on a pickpocket's folly.
I'm closing Painter's Gallery for the night when there's a knock at the door. I see who it is. Zach. He's one of the main leaders of the war on Zarel, the human capital world, and the war is going badly for them. My surprise is obvious. Khadisa, he says, and looks past the door. I let him in. The war is important not only to humans, it affects thinking beings throughout the known universe. A necromancer, along with creatures from an unknown realm, have enslaved the minds of countless individuals and are attempting to do the same across the universe. I thought you were on Zarel, I say, unsure what to say. I had to leave. It's clear he's not going to elaborate. What brings you to the gallery? I was wondering if I could stay here for a while, Zach says, and I'm surprised again. Trader's Hand is full of inns. There are rooms available across the street at the Dark Star. Sure. We move over to the gallery's lovely old wooden bar. He likes whiskey. I pour 2 glasses. He downs his, I follow suit, and then refill our drinks. Hungry? I could eat. Zach barely scents. He's uncharacteristically terse. I peg him as a meat eater, like most humans. I enjoy meat as well. Quaif steak? Sounds good. I order up 2 and some daruni on the side. I retrieve them from the replicator and hand him his steaming plate. He eats quietly. I don't mind. I'm not fond of a lot of talk during meals either. We finish with kutia pudding and 2 more whiskies. When I refill our glasses, Zach leans back and asks, "In for a story?" Like most mercs, I'm always ready for a tale, and Zach's stories are legendary. Always. As is customary when mercs begin a story, we down our drinks, refill the glasses, and down them again. When our drinks are full once more, Zach begins.
I was born somewhere and grew up on the move. We were actors in a traveling show. My first words came from a script. I liked the life. Seeing newness all the time was exciting, but acting was the real thrill. Being someone else and making the watchers feel it is a powerful drink. It always intoxicates. As it goes, day turns to night. My mother was a troubled woman, moody, dark. Something ate at her. Only the family knew about her distress. Outwardly, she was electrifying, the draw of the show. But when the lights went down, her heart sank. No one talked about it. They turned a blind eye to her pain, as if ignoring it would somehow heal what was killing her. We were doing a scene from a play my father made up where the heroine kills herself. When the trick knife went in that night, I saw something in my mother's eyes, a wish for release that made me wonder. When the crowd was gone and the rest of the family was asleep, I got out of bed to see her pacing and talking to herself. "What's wrong?" I whispered. She turned agonized eyes on me and sobbed a whisper. "Don't die." I was about to reassure her that I was fine when I saw that she was somewhere, sometime else. She held her belly, a pregnant woman in pain, and moaned, "Live, Zebediah. Oh God, please live." Her pacing and muttering picked up again, and I went to bed. I had no comfort for my mother. She died right before dawn, was in the ground before I woke up, and we were on our way to another town. I never saw where my mother spent her final rest. My father cashed in before the first show, sold off our wardrobe, and we headed east. He bought the first house he found in the first town he came to and settled down. I couldn't abide it. It was an affront to my mother's memory and a damn boring life. So I spoke the unspeakable, changing my name. He looked at me, offended by the regional dialect I picked up more than interested in what I had to say. "What?" "Zeb," I told him. He recoiled, alive and in pain for a moment, but the fog quickly returned to his eyes. "Not in this house," he muttered, and stormed out to get drunker. I left before he got back. It was my 10th birthday. I figured I'd find some show to join, and everything would be fine, but there was nothing to be had. Entertainment was a rarity in that area. I moved on and kept moving because towns were not for me. I liked them, but towns didn't seem to like me. Every time I stayed in one for more than a day or two, things went wrong. Most of the time I'd get thrown out for being a thieving kid. Sometimes I wound up in some little jail, and every now and then, something bad happened. I decided to see what was out east because our family always traveled the west, where they hungered for entertainment. It was a hard life out there. Judgments were quick and could get a person real dead, real fast. I figured it was only a matter of time for me. The big city life suited me. Anonymity, people with money, and plenty of places to hide. I wasn't one for begging, figuring that if I was able-bodied enough to work, I should earn my keep, so I kept an eye out for the right opportunity, and soon enough it arose. I hadn't been in the city long, and the bustle was still a little confusing. I was walking around gawking like some greenhorn when I felt a touch on my pocket. Light as a feather, nimble fingers searched and came up empty. I was young but strong from all the stage work and swordplay I'd done, and when I got the thief in my grasp, he couldn't pull away. He wasn't much bigger than me, but his touch told me he'd been picking pockets for some time. "Where'd you learn that?" I asked in deadly tones. His eyes went a little wild with fear, and he struggled. My grip tightened. "Speak up." I'd never deliver on the threat in my voice, but he didn't know that. "My sister," he moaned. I didn't let go. "Take me to her." You'd never notice her unless you found her eyes. When I looked into them, I saw dreams. She showed them to me the moment we met, then spoke in hidden glances. "Who's this?" Her brother didn't have to tell her what happened. It was written all over his face. He didn't say. She looked at him the whole time, but I knew she was sizing me up. She turned to me. "What do you want?" I took a moment to answer, like I was deciding about her, but I wanted in. "Show me how." I knew her answer the moment she'd opened her eyes to me. She nodded at her brother. "Jim, I'm Kay. Stay out of the way and watch." I found some steps to sit on while Jim and Kay walked down the street and blended in with the crowd. She was a flower girl, and he was a kid at play. They were putting on a show. The passing crowd was the audience, and those they picked were the props. Kay sold flowers and never touched a pocket. Jim was the principal player. She spotted the targets, directed him with her eyes, and provided distractions by hawking her wares. Jim put on little acts to get him near the target while keeping them unaware. They never knew when their money disappeared. I was enjoying the show, watching how Kay picked out likely targets, when I tensed up. The person she had her eye on was a bad move. It was easy to see how she made the mistake. He had one of those looks that seemed distracted, unaware, but though it seemed like he was looking nowhere, it was one of those stares that saw everything. It's not a city look. It comes from open spaces and a life lived hard. I'd seen it many times out west. They were the eyes of a deadly man. I tried to get Kay's attention, but she never looked my way. I turned to Jim, but he was already on the move, so I got up from the steps and started walking. I was moving fast, but I could see I wasn't going to stop it. I kept going, stretching my legs a little further. It was imperceptible, but the man started tensing up. He knew what was going on, but Jim and Kay didn't. I would have shouted, but I didn't want to give Kay away. Jim and I reached the man at the same time, and I went for his pocket before Jim could. He looked confused and angry, then walked past. The man caught my wrist in a grip I couldn't break and made a grab for Jim, but he took off running. Kay left her spot to follow him. Before she left, she gave me a look of hatred that froze my heart. After that, I didn't care that I was being dragged off to jail. I'd been locked up many times and looked forward to the time alone, but I'd never been in a big city jail before. It was crowded and dirty. The cells had rows of bunks, and all the bunks were full. Some of the men were sleeping on the floor. I didn't let it show, but I was scared because a little kid like me would be easy prey. It was a huge relief when I was stopped before an empty cell. When the bars closed behind me, I learned how wrong I was. Out of the shadows stepped a lean wolf of a man, the scariest person I've ever seen. I tried to keep my eyes to myself, but when he looked at me, I found myself staring into horror. There was death and cruelty in his deep green eyes, but there was more. Nameless mysteries, dreadful secrets, and an unfathomable darkness. I was caught in his searching gaze, and it felt like every thought was being sucked out of my head. If his hold on me wasn't broken, I knew I'd be lost. But I couldn't move, could barely think. I was slipping away when I made myself see Kay, her dreamy eyes filled with hate. The pain of it tore at me and set me free. What I saw in his eyes didn't matter anymore. I had my own abyss to stare into. When I looked away, he moved back into the shadows, and after a moment, I gathered myself together enough to take a seat on the floor. I didn't want to ask my terrifying cellmate which bunk was his. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting there when I heard, "Poker?" I feared how he might react if I said I didn't know how to play. He came out of the shadows with a hand in his pocket and a murderous look on his face. When he whipped his hand out, I flinched. He flashed a deck of cards. "I'll show you how," he said as if he knew my thoughts. Then just like that, his face changed. He almost looked kind. He explained the game quickly and dealt a hand. I could see he wasn't going to answer questions or tolerate mistakes. Before I picked up my cards, he asked, "What are you betting?" I pulled my hand back. "I don't have anything." The smile he gave me chilled me to the bone. He eyed me up and down, as if it was the first time he was seeing me. "You look like a bright lad." His voice was melodious and peaceful. "Come work for me, and we'll bet on your wages." I felt compelled to say yes, to take him at his word. But I made myself ask, doing what? I found myself wanting to look him in the eyes, so I stared at my boots. "They call me Doc, son," he crooned. "I'm a scientist. You would be assisting me in my research." It sounded vaguely ominous, but his soothing voice lulled me into agreement. He beat me bad. I knew he would, but I figured out how he did it, so it was worth the year of labor I owed him. I kept getting the feeling that he always knew what was in my hand while we were playing, and when I caught him watching me, I realized that he was reading my face. My reactions to my hands were giving me away. I wanted to try it on him, but couldn't risk getting caught in his eyes, so I kept my learning to myself. He might have known that I knew what he was doing, because he never asked me to play poker again. I figured he didn't want to risk the free labor. That night I dreamed of whispering trees.
Zach finishes his drink and grows quiet. His eyes are far away. Got to go out for a while. I should get to bed anyway. Almost forgot. Got something for you. A book. Painter's Journal. Painter is our main leader of the Mind Slave Wars. He and his mate May own this gallery I manage. His studio is in one of the back rooms. I give Zach a puzzled look and ask, "Why me?" "Found it on my ship with a message from Cougar to give it to you." I was so engrossed in Zach's story that I'd forgotten to ask, how are Painter and May? And Cougar? Stalking Cougar is the other main leader of the war. "I don't know," he answers. "We went out on a raid and got separated. I had to leave before I could find out what happened to them." Zach goes out, and I go to bed. I can't sleep, so I start reading Painter's Journal. When I come to its end, I put it down with tears in my eyes. Painter's story moves me, and not just because it revealed him to be my grandfather. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I've never been free to express myself. I trained to write, but my stories have been locked up inside me. Something has kept them prisoner. Painter's struggle for freedom gives me the courage to fight for what I most want in life. I will write.